10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Well, hello there.
Hello.
Welcome to episode 22 of Your Brain on God. We're so glad that you're with us. I know it's been a couple of weeks, but we've got a special guest, and her name is
Heather.
And your last name is
Sanford.
And my name is Aaron.
And my name is Daryl.
Woo!
Wow.
Hey.
We have Heather Sanford on with us to talk about resilience because she's a resilient fellow. She just totally kills it, and that's not
Resilient fellow. Really?
She's a silly fellow. It's going to be an amazing episode, guys. We talk about resilience. We talk about how to be more resilient in our lives because we all have hard stuff going on.
True. Mm-hmm.
All stuff coming at us from all different directions. North, south, east, west. You wouldn't believe it. Winds, waves, storms. Whoa, how do we deal with all this stuff? How do we have a positive outlook? What are ways that we can think? How do we have a hope for a future? How do we get solid community around us? This is going to be a great episode, and you're going to love it.
Wait for the rats. Listen long enough to wait for the rats.
Yes.
It's my only advice.
Listen to the hour and 4 mark, okay? Make sure you listen. Make sure you also follow us on Spotify, iTunes, Instagram, TikTok, Your Brain on God. We love you guys. Enjoy the episode.
If I put my eye on my mic, can you hear my ocular nerves?
Ocular nerves.
They itches.
They itches.
Oh my goodness.
I put my eye on my mic.
Listen to what I see.
Listen to what I see when I put my eye on my mic.
Oh my word.
Welcome to episode 22 of Your
22.
Brain on God. My goodness, little boggies. It's
here.
been way too long.
Right?
Yeah, it has. It has been a while.
It's been at least a couple days, and we miss knowing that some of you are listening.
Yeah, why did you take a break?
Well, we took a break. Well, first, let me just...
Oh, yeah.
Okay, we have a special guest on the podcast. Her name... Well, I'll let you introduce yourself. Say
Hi.
your name.
What's your name?
My name is Heather.
Hi, Heather.
My last name is Sanford.
Mm-hmm.
Like Sanford and Sons. You guys don't even know what that
Okay.
is because you're babies, but
There's a
that's
jewelry
okay.
place.
Jewelry
No,
place.
it's a TV show from like the 70s. Anyway,
Oh.
my name's Heather Sanford, and
She's
I'm
old.
Old? Wow. And I'm done. Bye. My agent did not give me more than 3 minutes. So nice to meet you. I'm just kidding. I don't have an agent. Anyway, I'm old. I'm 44. So these guys were in diapers when I was like graduating college.
No, you were in high school.
I literally started college the year that Aaron was born. We've talked about this.
I'm 29.
1994, you started?
Yeah, 1994 is when I graduated high school. Never again, never before. We're the class of 94.
That was your slogan?
Yes.
Whoa, you guys had a slogan?
Because we voted, and I voted for Out the Door in 94. Isn't that so much better?
Out the door in 94.
I
Yo.
graduated in 2010. And it was
Wow.
2010, never again.
See? Never again, never before. We're the class of 94.
Ours was put that on the shelf, 2012.
This is awesome. Put that on the shelf. 2012. It doesn't even rhyme.
Shelf 12.
Put
Put it on the shelf.
Put it on the shelf.
Just got gas at Shell 2012.
Anyway.
Into my future I delve.
Oh my gosh.
Amazing. Anyway, thanks for having me. I'm friends with these guys for a while now and glad to be here. Anyway, I'm a wife, I'm a mom, I'm a friend, all the things.
Do you have any kids?
I have 2 children. Bailey, she's 11 years old, going on 18. It's gross. And my son, Obadiah, who we call Obi. He's 8 years old. And Aaron is Obi's favorite person in the world, which is odd.
I do have a special relationship with Obi.
He loves you. Yeah, mostly because you play with him and throw him in the pool and wrestle and act like an 8-year-old yourself. So it kind of works out.
We had this whole thing last time. Heather, she forced me into babysitting her kids.
I did. It was forced.
I told her it was a one and done thing.
Oh my god.
That would never happen again. But basically,
One and done. He's not my son.
it was one. Oh my God. Wait, what?
Whoa.
Hey. That's awesome.
Do you guys have editing capabilities for these podcasts?
No,
Just
we don't
take
edit.
stuff
Usually
out.
don't.
Oh yeah, I
No,
know
we
this.
usually don't.
Okay.
We kind of just go for it.
But basically, Heather, she said, "Can you watch my kids?" And it was one of those moments in life where you literally just didn't have an excuse.
Yeah.
Like it's like, oh, I'm going out to dinner, sorry, or it's like, oh, I gotta go see my family, I gotta go pick up my sister, just anything that I could find. I literally was searching through just like the library of my mind for excuses not
And your
to watch her
girlfriend's
children.
out of town. So
my
you
girlfriend's
literally
out-
had
yeah.
no reason.
I literally couldn't say like, oh, I haven't seen my girl in a while. Like I couldn't say anything. I just had to say, sure, I can watch them.
I was like, really?
Yeah, she literally texted me back, really?
I thought
Awesome.
for sure
my
it was like
gosh.
an hour and a half before or something because all of my babysitters were like doing other stuff. And then Obi said his suggestion, can't Aaron watch us? Aaron promised he'd babysit me sometime. I was like, okay, let's see if Aaron can. I'm sure he'll say no. I'm sure he's busy, doing something in life.
He tried
And
to.
so when he says, okay, I can do it, I was like, really?
Yeah.
It was so fun though. You guys had a great time. You did night swimming.
Yep.
Hung up.
And I was the
super late.
goggler.
The goggler.
The giggle goggler,
The giggle
dude. I
goggler.
invented my own language, and I was like stealing goggles off of Bailey and Obi, and I was like, Bailey, give me your goggles.
See?
I want your goggles, Bailey. And then I would come and I would tap her goggles on
Oh my
the.
gosh, that's awesome.
I just wanted them really bad.
See?
And then I would only speak to Bailey if she spoke to me in giggle gogglish.
Could you give us an example of giggle goggle?
Yeah. Giggle, giggle, goggle, goggle, giggle, giggle. Giggle,
my
goggle,
goodness.
giggle, giggle.
Wow.
Giggle, giggle, goggle.
Oh my gosh.
And that's it. Wow. Okay, well, thank you for watching my children. Anyway, that's
Yeah.
about me.
Thank you for starring my children. I
And
appreciate it.
another fun fact, since this is my first time, I'm sure of many on the podcast.
Yeah.
I actually married Daryl and Brittany.
Yeah.
It's not like I didn't marry
three-way
them.
marriage.
I didn't marry them. I officiated their wedding. Is that
officiated
the
it.
right language? Okay.
No,
Yeah.
you do say I married you.
Which is a very interesting thing to say.
Because I would say I married Brittany.
Yeah, you did marry Brittany.
But then you also say you married
But I
me and
married
Brittany.
you and Brittany. You would say I married Brittany, but Heather married us, which is very weird.
Yeah.
Anyway, all I'm saying is I officiated the wedding of Mr. and Mrs. Daniels, and it was
She
a
did. It
beautiful
was
day,
awesome.
and you were there. So see,
I was.
we're
Everyone's
buddies.
there, we're all here. It's like a reunion.
It's a little reunion.
Except
and,
very nice.
and you
wife's
have a
not here.
background in ministry.
I do have a background in ministry. I have been in full-time ministry for a couple of decades, 24, almost 25 years.
25 years.
Yeah, because I'm only 31, but I started when I was really
You
little.
literally have my lifetime.
Yes.
My lifetime of
I
ministry.
have done ministry pretty much as long as you've been alive. We already established that.
Yeah.
So, I worked for a couple of different ministries and churches, and I also worked for a Christian high school at one point, a private Christian high school, which all my best friends said I should not do that because I'm not very private and I'm not very Christian. They
I
were
forgot
like,
that you worked there. I remember though.
but I am, but I'm not, but I am. You know what I mean? Okay, anyway.
You don't fit the mold.
I don't fit the box.
You didn't fit the box that they were building.
Yeah. I don't often fit the box, and that's okay. But anyway, see, I've been in ministry, done that for a while, until last fall, and now I'm just chilling. Like
Right.
the year of we don't know what we're doing. My husband and I both are literally unemployed, and we're like, what are you going to do when we grow up? Kind of a moment, you know. But it's
Right.
really been cool to just hang out with our family. And But yes, I have a heart for people, especially heart for the lost, and just kind of the people that are on the outside, like wouldn't find themselves like calling themselves a Christian or going to church or whatever those kind of things are, blah, blah, blah. But I really just have a heart for people to know who they are and know that they're loved and know that there's freedom and how God made them to be and all that good stuff. So I've done ministry for a long time,
Right.
both vocationally and just because that's just how I'm wired.
Right.
Like,
Just
I mean,
ministered.
yeah, I'll just go meet people at the gas station, like talk
Right.
to them, hang out with them, pray over them, that kind of thing.
Right.
I love that kind of stuff.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So then we were on staff at a church for a while together, which has been
All
really
three of
fun.
us.
Yeah, all three of
at the
us.
same
We were
time.
all doing youth at one point.
Can you
That's
imagine
true.
staff meetings? That's technically I was both of your bosses at one point in time.
You were.
How weird is that?
That actually is crazy.
I know. Didn't last very long, but it was fun for 5 minutes.
That's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
A beautiful thing.
Bosses.
Bosses. And that's what we're talking about today on the
Bosses.
podcast. Bosses.
Who's the boss?
But yeah, we're really excited to get into the podcast, and thank you for being here, Heather.
you
This
for
is
having me.
awesome.
Yes.
But yeah, we've been out for a little while. You know, some things came up, some life came up. We were doing different trips and stuff like that. But it's summertime, and
Summer,
it's time for a little
summertime.
your brain on God's summer. You know what I'm saying?
Summer edition.
And it's a summer edition. It's a hot summer night edition. It's a beach body edition of Your Brain on Bod. Bod.
Your
God. We don't need our brains on
Your body on God.
Your body on God. Whoa.
And
goodness.
we feel like there's nothing better to talk about as you're coming into the summer than resilience.
Resilience, because
Nice transition.
it is hot in Southern California.
I'll tell you what.
Yeah.
We're in this room
the
right
Inland
now,
Valley,
and you might not be
Inland
watching
Empire.
the video. You might not be able to tell by just listening to us because we're resilient. We're happy people, okay? But it's blazing up here.
It's so hot in this house right
I've
now.
got some serious man boob sweat going on.
It might be winter where you're listening. Or
Wow.
when you're listening,
When
maybe
you're
I should
listening.
say, or where,
But
depending
can we
on what
tell
part
the
of the
facts?
world you're in.
Can we tell the facts about why it's so hot in here? Because Aaron was supposed to get everything ready for the podcast, and he promised Daryl that he would be ready to go. And so Daryl went ahead and turned off the AC because they can't run it while they're doing the podcast.
Okay, a
'cause-
promise is a very strong term.
Oh, I'm
You
just
didn't
saying, I
promise.
heard it with
It's
my own
true.
ears. You were like, I got this. I will go upstairs right now and I will get everything ready. So Daryl relied on your word because your yes is yes and your no is no.
Okay, all right.
Well,
Anyway.
I knew that it may not be ready. You
Oh,
know,
you did?
I should have known better.
Oh, wow.
It didn't. I've worked with Aaron long enough. I know what.
Basically, what he's saying, hey guys, just so you know, I'm gonna fight Daryl on this podcast.
Aaron has been trying to start a
I'm just
fight with
trying
me
to help.
all day long.
I'm trying to help stir the pot. This is working.
We were talking about it today, and we just got to bring it up at this point. We got to squash the beef, or we got to fight right
we
here
gotta
on the
fight.
podcast.
Yeah.
Because Daryl and I, we haven't really fought. We're both very
so
even.
We're fight
Ever.
about not fighting right now.
Exactly. We're very even keeled. Easy. We're easy going.
Easy going, even keel.
Easy killed and even going.
we're even keeled, easy going. And the thing is that I'm looking for a fight. And I just feel like it's not a true relationship unless you have fought each other.
Wow.
And you've made it through.
That's deep.
And someone came away with the other person's tooth in their
Yeah.
hand.
Wow.
Because there was some sort of verbal joust that turned physical.
Yeah.
We're getting there.
We're getting
We're almost there.
and I'm
I
trying to
feel it.
stir up my heart right now so that we can fight.
So one of us can lose a tooth, the other person can walk away with it. Then
Wow.
we can know that our friendship is real.
I want to know
Wow.
that 30 years down the line, my kids come up to me and I've got a chain with a tooth.
I'm gonna have the tooth.
Wait, no.
I'm gonna
Both
have
of
the
us are
tooth.
gonna
Look at that.
exchange teeth.
No. That means it's
No.
even.
No, I'm gonna have a tooth for sure.
Oh my goodness. I'm just
And
going
they
to
would
take a
say,
nap.
"Daddy, is that a shark tooth?" And I would sit them down and I would say, "No, son. I want to tell you about a guy named Daryl."
Oh.
All right. And I would go into an entire story about how we thought we were friends and how we had this journey towards self-discovery, and we realized that we just weren't compatible and that there only could be one.
One what?
What is happening?
One
One
of us.
podcaster.
And then there was one. Wow. What do you have to say about that, Daryl?
Well, I think the
That's-
tooth is that's around his neck is gonna be his own tooth
Oh.
that I took, and I gave it back to him as a grace.
Oh,
As
wow.
a
And
grace.
so he wears that as a reminder
Oh,
to
yeah.
not mess with Daryl.
Perfect. Well played, Daryl. Well played. Wow. Anyway, well, now that we've established that, it shows that you guys are very resilient. See?
Wow,
Oh, yeah,
our
that is
transitions are great. Hey, if you've been listening all the way into the podcast, we do want to jump into resilience. You know, this had been a crazy season. Obviously, with COVID, it seems like
Yeah.
we're on the tail end of some of the COVID stuff, or at least some stuff lifted where, I don't know, people aren't wearing masks as much and stuff like that. I don't want to get into COVID. Anyway, but basically, it's been a tough season. There's
Yeah.
been a lot of people stuck inside, struggling with, just mental struggles, mental struggles, but obviously people are going through physical struggles all around the world, right? And there's people that are very resilient, and there's people who maybe just give up and want to die,
Yeah.
But we want to talk about resilience, what it means to be resilient, how to walk in resilience, what it actually, how can we actually orient our brains to actually live in a place of no matter what comes at us, we're going to make it through,
Sure.
And we've talked a lot about on the podcast about dealing with emotions and dealing with hard emotions and being present in the midst of emotions, and being aware of those different types of things, being aware of pain and struggle and trials, but not entering into suffering, I guess, like a difference between, going through a hard time and then actually suffering through that hard time and how we actually get through that. But we want to talk about resilience today.
Yeah,
So,
I'm gonna read a definition.
do it.
It's a psychological resilience specifically. So it's a psychological resilience is the ability to mentally or emotionally cope with a crisis or to return to pre-crisis status quickly.
We read a definition earlier
Interesting.
that was about like bouncing back.
Yeah, it mentioned elasticity. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's interesting that the second half of that definition would say that part of the goal of resilience would be to return to pre-crisis. Because if I wrote the definition, I would counter that. Because I think the whole point of crisis, the whole point of resilience within crisis is to become a different and better version of you pre-crisis.
Right.
Which oftentimes for me as a person of faith, and hopefully you guys would agree, I think crisis is intentional, not necessarily put on us intentionally, but there's space for it to happen so that we can become more of who we're supposed to be or understand who God is, more of who he's supposed to be. So the thought to going back to like when hard things happen, I just want to get resilient enough to bounce back to like who I was pre-COVID or pre this job loss or pre this tragedy in my life is almost robbing you of the growth of what's going to propel you to be. You know, it's kind of the idea of walking up a mountain, around and up.
Right.
That you don't want to like go back down the mountain. You want to keep going up and around. So
Yeah. It's not about going back to how we were before,
right?
Meaning the same place in life. Yeah, I think it's like but returning to a place of stability.
Yeah,
you know, because I think when we go
sense.
through crisis, things feel crazy.
Yeah,
and it's like we're stressed out, but being able to return to a place of stability and groundedness quickly.
Yeah, absolutely.
I guess you would have to define like what the stability is. So it's talking about like you were stable before the crisis happened, basically.
Yeah. So this is about going through the crisis, being able to cope when going through a crisis and return to whatever your mental state was, I guess, beforehand. But I guess you would want it to become better anyways.
Right.
But it makes sense what it's saying.
Yeah,
to be fair to the definition, I get what they're saying.
Right, but it's good to clarify that that's probably not what it means. Is
right.
like it's what you said. It's probably not about going back to the way that we were before.
Right.
But going to a place of being okay, like being mentally okay, emotionally stable, but being in a better place.
Being in a better place.
Right.
Continuing to go up the mountain.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. So it's like everything rocks and sways and then it's just coming back to like even, like balanced maybe.
Yeah, it's balanced, but then we are stronger. I just read this quote by the great nihilist himself. Nietzsche.
Who has something to say about resilience.
He does. He said, that which does not kill us makes us stronger.
I feel like what doesn't kill you make you stronger.
Shout out to Kelly. You know, that's what I thought too.
Well, a lot of what we go through is, I guess, reactionary versus what would the opposite be? Like actually getting ready for something like that. Like the resilience, like oftentimes we're experiencing life as it happens. You know what I mean?
Right.
Or we can get into a place of just like something catching us off guard and then we go into crisis mode, right? So that's why I asked that question of like, what actually was stability? Because the idea, when I think stability, I think of something, if a crisis were to happen, it stays stable. Right, like we build foundations on strong things, so that when you know crises do happen, we have houses that stand for the most part. I mean, unless it's like something crazy, but we have houses that stand, we have buildings that stand, we have structures in place that can withstand that type of crisis, right? So that's what I mean. What does it mean to actually come back to a place of stability from crisis? So because it necessarily, what I at least would imagine in my mind is crisis happens means that there was an area perhaps in your life where maybe you thought you had stability, but it got it got taken out. Because if a crisis can take you out, you probably weren't prepared for that crisis, and that's life. You know what I mean? I'm not saying that you can always be prepared for everything that comes your way, because you can't. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's like the difference between reactive healthcare and proactive or preventative healthcare. So it's like self-care in the same way is whatever you are feeding into yourself, your life, your friendships, your community, your relationships, your passions, anything, the more you're preemptively creating a space, a life that you want to live as the whole and healthy version of you, will allow for more resilience to come when that carpet does get pulled out from under you. Because it's not a matter of if the carpet gets pulled out, it is when. And we all know that. I mean, there's been several moments in my life, that just I thought things were going smooth and I was doing this and it was all beautiful and wonderful, and then just gets ripped out from under you. And so that's the whole point of what you're saying. Preventative is when you're doing things pre the crisis so that you have stability in your life, balance, people to check in with, resources, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so it's having the stability even if the crisis is still there. Right. That's resilience, is in the middle of the crisis being able to be in that pre-crisis status. Yeah. Right. So before the crisis hit, how much is that actually changing you? How much are you reacting to it rather than going through things that help you learn how to respond well? Right. So you can mentally and emotionally cope.
So there would be kind of like a trifold, like layers to that resilience then, because you have like the preemptive, okay, we have to get things in place. So because necessarily there's going to be things that hit my life that I want to be at least emotionally ready for as much as I can be, you know what I mean, to have a sense of a self-awareness or emotional intelligence or good relationships around me, so that when that happens, so you have like the preemptive and then you have during. How do you actually deal with a crisis and actually stay in the fight during it? And then the aftermath, how do you actually get to that place where you don't just, you bounce back, but then you also, what we talked about, where you come back to even more. Right.
Yeah. You're building up resilience. Before. We're building resilience before the crisis hits.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. Exactly. You guys, when Aaron asked me, hey, we want to do a podcast on resilience, and Daryl and I thought, we need to talk about Heather. I basically was like, well, that's a compliment and also really sad. Because they're like, who's been through a really lot of crap lately but is still doing okay? And they're like, Heather. And it's only because what you just said, like who I am and the experiences I've had in life have taught me to know that my identity is not wrapped in what I do or my circumstance. Right. It's wrapped up in who I am, who I was created to be. Right. So I've gone through one of the hardest seasons of my life this last year, getting let go from a job that I loved and a ministry that I thought it was, I'm going to be here for the next decade at least, to my husband and I not doing well in our marriage. And you guys know a lot about that. And so now there's been breakthrough there, and to him losing his job a month ago. And we're like, what are you doing, Lord? But it's because of all the other circumstances leading up to that, where I have figured out not to get wrapped up in, then who am I? Right. When your passion, the thing that you're going after, it's like the football player that has been working their whole life through high school and college, and they make it to the NFL and they get hurt in game 2, right? And they have like a knee blowing out injury. Right. And then they go into major depression, anxiety, all these things happen. And a lot of that is because their whole identity was wrapped up in what they did, like how the passion they pursued, the thing they were good at, the thing they were complimented most on. And so that's hard to be resilient after that, unless you have something that rises up in you that says, I am not to be defined by the fact I'm a football player. Right. But, or if it's, I have a passion and this is why I will work hard every day to restore and get back to that place, And so that's what actual resilience is, right? Is when something happened to us that was unexpected, or that we didn't want. It wasn't our desire. It wasn't the natural way in which we had hoped things would go, but finding a space within who you are to not let it conquer you. And I would say this too, because a part of the whole thing with me and being resilient even this last year is allowing myself real space, though, to grieve the reality of what happened and not just be the very next day like, everything's fine, everything's good, God's going to take me through this and we'll be fine, because that's not real. We tried that
for a little bit.
Yeah, I didn't try that ever, but you tried it. No, I'm kidding.
No, remember in the beginning? It was that, wasn't it? We went to a conference. It was basically don't feel sorry for yourself, right?
Oh, we went to a conference 2 weeks after I got let go, and the speaker's like, there's nothing that's that bad in your life.
Well, that wasn't the message.
I was like, what? Okay, well, this is pretty bad, but
right.
Okay.
Literally, his first message was don't feel sorry for yourself.
Don't feel sorry for yourself, whatever you're going through. But it was, but to allow myself space to grieve and be head to head with the reality of hard things also created more of a space for me to practice resilience later, to know that. But going back to what I was saying, the biggest point I would like to make is that identity thing. When we get wrapped up in who we are by what we do or what we're known for, then it is harder to be resilient when that is taken away. And so resilience is created when there's time and time again, you do realize sometimes it's short, sometimes it's long, but there is a path back to what you're talking about earlier, stability, like remembering who I am. And we've talked about this even a few months back.
Right.
I literally was having conversations with several of my good friends about, I feel like I'm becoming me again. Right. So that there's something to that, because these things that knock us down, they do send you into a season of, angst or hurt or depression or sadness or whatever it might be that doesn't feel healthy or positive, even though they're necessary. Right. And then you start feeling like you're climbing back up the mountain and realizing, wait a minute, I remember me again. And that's actually to me what resilience really looks like, Yeah.
And I would say, I love that so much. I would say even a little bit broader of that is not tying yourself to much of anything. In the sense of like oftentimes when we're going through struggles, there's a tie of that struggle to identity or towards meaning in your life, towards purpose, towards the way life should pan out. Right. So towards your own expectations, towards what your views or your perception is of what family should look like, what marriage should look like, what that person should look like, how this relationship, how I should interact with this person, whatever the kind of suffering, we tie ourselves to these things. And then when things happen in our lives, oftentimes they're so shattering because they kind of open up our eyes as a contradiction to what we know about that person, or what we know about ourselves, or what we know about the world, or what we know about God.
Yeah.
And so it leads us into this where we're like trying to grapple with what we believe and what we know to be true or thought we knew to be true, and then the suffering, right? Which causes more suffering, So that's the same thing with the basketball player who blows out his knee, and then he was tied to, I had this, so I can't play this anymore because that gave me identity, or the relationship that I put so much trust in, right? It's like this person does something that's contrary to what they've done before, but I was tied to who they were, right? Or and who they were in relation to me. So now I'm just like, I'm tossed for a loop, know?
Right.
Or I was tied to this job because it gave me identity, or it gave me purpose. So that happens. Or I thought God operated in this way,
Right.
I thought God was supposed to protect me from this, And so then it's like, and then that leads to not the experience of the problem in itself, but you have all of these tie-ons that make it heavier, right?
Yeah.
Because now it's no longer my husband lied to me. It's more than that. It's more than what just happened. You know what I mean? It's I had a view of you and now that's been shattered, or I have an expectation for this and that's been taken or stripped. You know, and so those ties to things, I think, it preemptively. Right? When you have all those, and I'm not saying otherwise you just have to not tie yourself to anything in some way, you know what I mean? And be stone cold. I'm not saying to do that by any means, right? But all of those ties to things, you're setting yourself up for your hope to be in other things to where it could be cut off, I guess. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, my grandma always says the greatest frustration comes from unmet expectation. So when you have expectation that a marriage is supposed to look like A, B, C, D, and a job in ministry is supposed to look like A, B, C, D,
and God's supposed to do this,
the way this thing is supposed to work, or the way God is and His attributes, it's supposed to be A, B, C, D. And we have this linear way of thinking, and so when that's ripped out from under you or shaken a bit, like out of your heart, we talk about this all the time, but from out of your heart is what overflows out of your mouth. It's from your heart. So when your heart is built up with expectation, or just the way you believe life to work, the way it's structured, the way things go, that's going to in time show when it's rubbed that it's like the truth comes out, right? And so that's the whole point. Resilience is, have you built in enough stability of truth, of knowing who you are and who to put around you, that you can bounce back from those things, maybe quicker than you might tailspin into years of like grief and depression. And what you said earlier, it's like the idea of when something happens, you can visit there, but you don't want to set up camp and live there, you know? And so when something happens and you're sad or you're angry or you're upset or you're confused, it's okay to deal with those real emotions because they're real. And if you suppress them, they're only going to grow larger and affect you in other ways. But then you realize, but I don't want to live. I don't want to camp out and say, but I'm depressed or I am now wounded by fill in the blank, this person or this organization or this thing, because then that just makes you a victim. And then you set up the camp. You're like, this is me and I'm a victim. When you walk by, come feel sorry for me. I didn't want to set up camp at my house, in the fall and be like, everyone just come over and hug me and say, yeah, this is this and this and that. It's like, yes, they can stop by and visit and be like, we're so sorry. And this is confusing, but also what's going to happen now to move forward. And it took me a few months to really sit with the reality of how rocked I was, then to realize, well, what is open to the future? What is going to happen now? And so, yeah, I think that's a whole point of resilience right there, just to know when it rocks you, you see what comes out. And then you're able to go, wow, what came out was ugly. Right here, I have mistrust about what I believe to be true in the church or in my relationship or my husband, right? And so you also get to confront yourself to realize I had this belief I didn't know I had, this like ugly place, right?
Yeah.
My counselor Max said something cool. I mean, he was talking about relationships, but I think it ties into this as well. He's like, we go to the same counselor, but
we recommend him.
Has he showed you the vase?
No.
The vase? Okay, so like the vase, it could, like a vase, you could have a vase and it could look really good, but you can't really I guess test the quality of the vase until you pour water into it. Because then you start to see where the leaks are. You start to see where the problems are. You start to see where those cracks are, right? And it's the same thing kind of with us. And he was talking more in the relationships when struggles come or miscommunication happens, right? You have this kind of picture, this vase as a picture of relationships. But then once the water starts to pour in, you start to see the cracks in yourself. You start to see kind of the holes and what needs to be patched up, what needs to be molded back, right?
Makes sense.
And I thought that was pretty cool. But that's how it is in resilience, right? It allows you to grow from that place, right?
Yeah,
it kind
absolutely.
of, when you get water, actually, I guess the storms come, right? you get the water poured in, and it shows where the cracks in you are, so that more preemptively, right? That's like the next time, rather than hardening your heart, right? It's like, I need to get this. I need to put my hope in something, or I want my hope to be in something else, or maybe I need to change or reshift these expectations that I have on this person. Like I think about we had a church leader at our church. It basically had like a moral failure, and so he got fired and all of this different kind of stuff, and it wrecked a lot of people. Well, it caused obviously havoc for the people that were involved in the misconduct, like specifically involved. But then the aftermath of the church, people that were close to this guy, people that were friends or whatever, like them being, what I mean? Like the distrust that was caused, and then even the distrust being tied to the church in some way, or their past experiences with churches and leaders. And it led to some people leaving, or, just being caught up in her, or getting bitter or whatever. And for me, it was such a different experience. I wasn't as close to him. I was close to him. He started to mentor me, but it was kind of like, he's a human being. You know what I mean? So my expectation kind of changed how I responded to something that was so tumultuous for somebody. Also like, he's a guy. I was never really tied to him in the first place.
He's a human being.
He's a human being. So when it happened, it was like, that makes sense. Or like that he's a human being. I'm not saying I agree with it. I was mourning with the people who were actually got affected by it. But as far as like me getting tossed into chaos or something like that, it was just like, he's a guy, you know what I mean? Like, because I wasn't putting my hope in this guy to like lead me in some way. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
I think that there is a lot of times where we can put our hope in something, or we have the expectations for someone, and it's not even it might not even be a bad thing, because because that's what it means to trust somebody.
Yeah, to put your hope
when
in
I
them,
trust somebody, then I am expecting something, right? I'm kind of expecting not to get hurt, so I trust them.
Sure.
And I guess you could trust somebody and expect for them to hurt you, but I don't know. I'm not sure how that works. But you can.
If you're a UFC fighter.
Right. If you're a UFC fighter,
I trust you to hurt me.
I trust you to make this a good fight. But,
yes. Exactly.
But normally, why would we choose that? Yeah.
Right. So I think that it is so important to be able to trust someone and be vulnerable, right? We've talked about vulnerability and how important that is in relationships, to open and to connect. And it can be dangerous and tempting to then stop expecting things, right? Because I don't want to get hurt, so I'm not going to hope in anybody. I don't want to get hurt, so I'm not going to expect anything from anybody.
Right.
I'm not going to expect my husband to be honest with me, so then whatever happens, it's okay.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't expecting it, right? But that isn't it. It might seem like resilience, right? Because
it's
now
just defense, though.
all these things are happening and I don't care, right? And I don't care. That's different. Apathy is not resilience.
And I hope that you guys are getting my heart. I don't mean that. I'm just talking about healthy expectations, or at least trying to buld those up.
Yeah,
for people.
I didn't think it was. Yeah, I didn't think that's not what you. I knew that wasn't what you're saying. But
I know it can sound like don't get close to anybody and don't tie yourself to anybody. That's not what I mean.
No, but I think it can. I think it can happen. I think that happens, right? That we might think I expected this from somebody and now I'm disappointed, so I'm not going to expect anything.
Right.
And so that might feel like building resilience, because now I'm tough. I don't need you to do anything. I can do this on my own.
Right.
But there's a balance between being able to put yourself out there to get hurt, right? And in that moment, when you experience the pain, to know that it's okay to feel that pain.
Right.
I think that's part of resilience.
Right.
Is actually experiencing the pain and recovering from it.
Totally.
Right.
Absolutely.
When we're not resilient, we feel the pain and we just keep feeling the pain. We're not recovering from it. But resilience requires us to feel the difficulty, right? It requires us to go through pain and hardship. And it requires us to navigate those, right? That's where what resilience shows up, is in those moments when we feel it.
It's like the willingness to re-engage in hope no matter what. So like when you guys very first, when Aaron talked to me recently about doing this, and I thought resilience, okay, what do I know about resilience? And the first thing that always comes to mind for me is when we say the phrase like children are so resilient. Like kids are so resilient. Like they get tossed on their head when they're 3 months old and they get a big old knot and you're like, oh, that's fine. Kids are resilient. Like he'll be fine. And we honestly, well, you guys don't know because you're not parents yet, but someday call me when you need parenting advice. Okay. It's going to be fine. But the reality is kids break their leg, break their arm, they get scraped, and here's the thing that's interesting is it depends on their community, how they in fact realize and then carry out that resilience. Because, for example, if you have a son or a daughter that's, maybe 3 or 4 and they fall over, like they're starting to walk and they're kind of running, they fall over and they scrape their knee. If you have a parenting style that says like right away, oh my goodness, are you okay? Come here, let mommy see. Oh, you poor thing. And then they are crying and they're stuck in their pain because all of a sudden they're external, influences are saying like, you're hurt. This is not okay. Let me cater to you. Let me make sure. But the moms that are like, you're fine. Get up, shake it out. Are you good? Are you good? High five. Wow, that was awesome, buddy. It's like they're able to spin it like you're in a little adventure. You're tough. You're resilient. Like we literally say that to our kids. And so what you're saying is as we then come into our adult, and we learn from that, it's this dichotomy of resilience isn't like, you're fine. Don't worry about it. You're not really bleeding from the limbs. Shake it off. Go back and play. It's realizing, okay, there's hurt done. Let's acknowledge the hurt. Let's make sure we're okay and let's move on, versus like catering to the hurt. Like, oh, come here. No, you're not going to play the rest of the afternoon. Let me helicopter mom you and keep you really close. And I'm going to keep telling you. So when I was saying earlier, when we were talking about the preemptive ways to make sure you're going to live a resilient life, is who do you have around you? What truth are they going to speak to you? That people are going to say, yeah, you were hurt, like that circumstance you were talking about at church, and it's a series of stringed events where people go, well, I'm never going to find a church that doesn't have this happen, because it's happened at this church and then at this one. And you know what? There's probably absolute truth to that, because we're human and we fall short and we don't make the right choices all the time. And so there's always going to be, only always, when you're in a room of adults, there's going to be failure at some point. And so the resilience comes when we recognize that, but we choose hope. We choose to say, I'm going to remain and I'm going to be a part of the difference. I'm going to be a part of truth and honest living and growth and all those things, instead of just ignoring or putting up the walls and saying, well, I'll get through this because I'll avoid it. Well, that's not resilience at all. That's just cutting yourself off to being hurt, like you were mentioning. And I think resilience shows where can you find hope in the hurt, and then help, first of all, yourself to remain, and then others to remain, and say, wow. Like, and people would say that even to me, like, I'm still going to my church right now, our church, and, and even though I'm not on staff, and I've had so many people ask me, like, I just am so surprised. How are you still there? And I'm like, Well, because it's a family, and if there's
Right.
hard things that happen in a family, you don't just cut off your family and say, well, that's just not who I am anymore.
Right.
You have to be there and go through the hurt, and when you are realistic about it, you can then also find hope in it. Like there's hope for change, there's hope for growth, there's hope for goodness to come, and that there's resilience in that. Not the avoidance of it, you know. That's a big difference, like you were saying, Daryl.
So how would you say something you mentioned earlier about your purpose and not being tied to something specific, and remind me of this that I read earlier. It says that resilience is made up of 5 pillars: self-awareness, mindfulness, self-care, positive relationships, and purpose. We've kind of talked about positive relationships actually. And there is tons of research done. There's a particular, I think Harvard did a huge study on the human life, what makes the human life a good life. And it was relationships, right?
Yeah.
Right.
They said that the people who had at least one person who loved and cared for them, and they knew that, and they felt loved and cared for by them, that person was more resilient, right? Against sickness, through hard times and difficulties.
Yeah.
Having someone in your life who loves and cares for you and supports you actually makes you more resilient.
Yeah.
And one of the things I remembered when you guys were going through a lot, was how quickly you kind of clarified your purpose and almost reminded yourself of your purpose, right? That it's bigger than a particular role, that it goes beyond that.
Right.
That your purpose was about loving people, right? And you were like, you started talking, I don't remember exactly what you said, but you started talking about the different things that you can now do, the way that your purpose can now be expressed, because you're not doing it. It's not going to be expressed this way, but it's going to be expressed another way.
Right.
Yeah.
What is the thing? Oh, we just read it. It was by a samurai that he said my
now that my barn is burned.
Yeah, I can see the moon.
I can see the moon.
He just read that to me. That's so good.
Yeah.
It's true, because a structure that you have in front of you is good. I mean, to use his example, a barn. I don't know why a samurai would be giving an example about a barn, but anyway,
Farmers.
I think samurai
is he a farmer? Okay,
It's
cool.
17th century, so
I need to be educated about samurai. But if there's a structure that
you've never seen the movie with Tom Cruise, this is ridiculous.
I have seen it.
Why did we have her on the podcast?
oh my gosh.
Oh my goodness. So it's, if the barn is there and it served a great purpose, and then you're wrapped up in that, it's not necessarily that that's bad. It's very good. And it served a purpose for a season, and you're a farmer. You're there to, tend to the animals, and whatever you needed to do in that space, you created it. But then when something happened, and if the barn got burned down, and you could either look at the ashes on the ground for years of your life and just keep staring at that and say, we used to have the cows and the sheep in here, and we used to have the horses, and we used to have a reason to get up at 5 a.m. and come do this and that, and you can just be so bummed and sad about it. Or you can literally come out in the evening time, like this analogy says, and go, whoa, look at this landscape that was, the barn was blocking my view of the stars and the moon and the beyond. And so yes, right away I felt like there was things in my life that the Lord was like, Heather, you're fine, because now you're going to be able to expand even more in how he's wired me to be individually. But like I said, that only came from a lifetime of going through things and then realizing it's like you kind of narrow the gap a little bit. And so you're like, I'm not going to waste a few years. I'm going to actually just acknowledge the ashes, be sad for a minute, make some s'mores on top of the fire, and then let's figure out, let's look at the stars. It's like our dreams, bam, everything, future's wide open again. And that's resilience, because it's the ability to lift your head up and just go, okay, so what next, or what now, and who am I? Going back to what we were saying, it's not who I am was not wrapped up in this one job or this one title. Who I am is wired to love people, to bring freedom to people, and even in the last 8 months for me personally, the irony is I've pastored more people through my crisis than me. You guys laugh because it's true. I've been able to still love and support and counsel people that are confused about how I'm taking the stands that I'm taking. And so I'm still a pastor. I'm still pastoring people. I'm still loving others. I'm still bringing freedom. I'm still speaking truth. I don't have a title or a paycheck to go along with it right now, but it doesn't change who I am. And so to be able to walk in that and lift my head back up in the appropriate amount of time, there was some time to look at the ashes and be super bummed, and it circles back around. That's the stages of grief, right? You don't just go through all 5 things, grief, and what's grief, anger and bargaining and denial, sadness, and then acceptance. Did I miss one? Whatever. I think we said all 5 between us. But you don't just go through them and then you're done. It's like you circle back and you circle back and then you circle back and you go hit this one for a minute and then that one for a minute. And that's just how we're wired because memories come up and things. But at each time you then have a choice to lift your head back up and go, okay, but then what am I looking toward? And you talking about the community thing, I think is huge. That's why I mentioned that. It's like who you have around you, what kind of parenting style when that kid gets hurt matters. It's like who you're placing in your life that when you do go through a crisis or something painful, are people that are going to come around you, are they going to speak truth or are they just going to speak you? And what I mean by that is I see this all the time with relationships. Like I've been married 14 years and, we've gone through our fair share of struggles, like I mentioned earlier, and we're in a good place right now. And it's very awesome to see breakthrough. But what I have done is I've surrounded myself with people that are not Team Heather or Team Joshua, they're Team Marriage. So I always call that when I say to my friends, like, look, I'm for both of you. Right. I'm not for your side of the story versus your side. I'm for Team Health, right? Team Marriage. And the same thing when you're going through a hard situation, you want people in your life that are like, I'm Team Resilience. I'm Team, I believe in you and you're going to get through this and be an even better version of yourself. So I'm with you in the middle of the mess so that I'm a reminder to you of who you are, not what you do. Yeah. And that's so important. And that's why it does say that, relationships. I love those 5. What were those 5 things again? Can you read them? Yeah. Like you said self-awareness, which one, that's identity. Huge. Knowing that who you are, it's not about what you do. It's about who you are, who you're wired to be. Mindfulness, that's perspective. Yeah. And you guys talk about that a lot on your podcast. So good job. Like so much of life, of victory in life is just literally changing your mind. Like that same counselor that Aaron and I both go to separately because he's awesome. He asked my. We go together. We don't go together, but we go to the same counselor. And he told my we need friendship counseling. he told my husband and I, and I think we've talked about this because I think he might have said it to you too. But it's like how long does it take a person to change? Like if they're an addict or if they're in a destructive path or if they're depressed or anxious, any fill in the blank of these negative things, how long does it take that person to change? And so my husband and I are like thinking about it. It's like, and we're trying to give this real like thought out answer, it depends on the circumstance and if they're willing to, go to counseling or do the work and might take and Max, he just looks at us, Max, and he just smiled and he goes, I'll tell you how long it takes. And he snaps his fingers. Jeez. He's like, just like that. And because it's mindset, it's perspective. It's just a belief here that then translates to your heart that then you live it out. You're like, oh, so if I can convince myself here in my mind, this is who I am. This circumstance is not good. It felt gross or it hurt or whatever. There was pain. Mm-hmm. But if I want resilience, it's reminding ourselves, it's just a perspective shift. Like, oh yeah, we both lost our jobs. Bless you. Thank you. But yet look at like what God has provided, and we're here and we have a roof over our head and a beautiful backyard, and there's so always things to be grateful for, right? So mindfulness can also just be gratitude. Yeah. Right.
Self-care was the other one.
Self-care.
Positive relationships.
Something you're not good at. So let's have Daryl talk about self-care. No, I'm kidding.
I haven't showered in weeks, everybody.
We know. Yeah.
I only chew gum now. I don't brush my teeth.
And I only chew gum. That's my dentist said. Chewing gum after every meal is good for you. So I just started doing that instead of brushing my teeth.
Look at me now. He smiles. Nothing.
Interesting.
There's no teeth.
No teeth. Interesting. But self-care.
I lost all my cavities. No teeth left.
Self-care. Are you talking about? Okay, self-care. So sleeping.
Yeah, taking care of ourselves. Mm-hmm. Right. Sleep, getting good sleep, knowing our needs. I think this kind of ties in with self-awareness because in order to take care of ourselves well, we need to be aware of our needs, right?
Yeah.
Being in tune with the desires that we have and where they're coming from, right? Am I wanting to do this thing or go to this place or eat this food because I'm stressed or because, If I'm aware of those things, I can make better decisions to actually take care of myself.
Right.
Because when we're not taking care of ourselves, it's so crazy how intertwined the body is.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
How much our body affects our brain and our mind and how that affects our body.
Oh, yeah.
And part of keeping our whole self healthy is taking care of ourselves, making good decisions with sleep, with diet, with exercise, and with the way that we process things, just the things that we tell ourselves as well. I think it's easy in a time of crisis, especially, to talk down to ourselves.
We don't really think about that as self-care,
Interesting.
Like actually caring for yourself even just mentally, like talking sweet, speaking sweet nothings
Talking
to yourself.
sweet to
Yeah,
yourself.
exactly.
But being
Wow.
kind to yourself, I wouldn't think that self-care mind to me that went like, oh, okay, I gotta eat healthy, I gotta go to the gym, which is all good stuff, but also taking care of yourself as far as you know, mentally.
It's like if I was going to care for someone else, I think giving reassurance,
Wow.
encouraging them, that's part of caring for somebody.
having empathy.
Absolutely.
Having empathy for that
Right.
person, you
Yeah.
know, but we forget to do that for ourselves, especially when we're going through something that's hard, or we think that we have caused part of the issue.
Right.
Then we start beating ourselves up. We start not having empathy
Right.
or compassion.
You go down the rabbit trail.
Yeah.
And then
yeah.
anxiety comes, depression, blame, scapegoating, all those things happen.
Yep, and we feel like totally like our energy is drained because we feel discouraged and we
Right.
don't want to do anything else. We don't want to eat healthy. We don't want to go exercise.
Right.
And a lot of that I think can happen with our self-talk.
Right.
Just how
100%.
we're talking to ourselves.
And I think there's a difference between taking ownership, right? And then also speaking life into yourself, because there are sometimes things happen where you have to self-reflect and realize I need
did
to
this.
own this part. It's like we talked about earlier when all of a sudden something's revealed and those ugly parts of you come out and you're
Right.
like, whoa, I thought I dealt with that when I was, 7, 17, 27, 37, what, and here it
Right,
keeps
right.
coming back
Right.
up. And so to realize that and not to cut those things off and say, but I'm good and I'm great and I'm this and I'm that, because I'm a very
Right.
confident person, as you guys know.
Yes.
And so I live my life very out loud and free and authentic and confident. And it doesn't mean I don't wrestle with certain insecurities sometimes, but I kind of am an anomaly in that, where I've just always been very confident. I think it's a gift from the Lord. It's not necessarily anything I've self-cultivated, but in that, there still needs to be humility within knowing your self-worth, knowing
Right.
who you are, to also recognize what you need to own in the moment that brought pain, and then you can move forward from there. So self-care, like we already just said, it's not just the physical attributes. It's often more times, because you see people that go on these crazy fad diets and work out, and then they like look amazing. Like if you put a picture of them, you're like, and then in their mind, they still are that overweight, ugly,
Right. Yeah.
unattractive person that was hurt or bullied when they were in 5th grade. You know what I'm saying? And
Right.
you could tell them a million times, show them pictures of themselves and say, are you kidding me? You're literally the world's definition of hot. And they just don't see it. And then
Right.
it gets to unhealthy places where they just
Right.
keep going. So I think more important, even those physical things, it has to start with your mindset.
Right.
And then then those things can correlate, and you need to get good sleep and eat and all the good things. But being just at a healthy place about knowing who you are, which means you know your strengths and your weaknesses, know what you contributed, both good and bad, to your scenario. It does help you to bring a quicker resilience, because
Right.
you're not denying your part. You're not just saying this was the world's fault, they did this to me. It's like, no, you played a part in it as well.
Right.
And so to own that and then have that healthy mindset. But I think self-care is a great preemptive benefit to being resilient, because that way you don't, if you're taking care of yourself, your mind and your body, and then your relationships, your work, like you're doing it excellently because it matters, your purpose, whatever you're doing, then it creates, when those hard things happen, it creates space to you to be quicker to forgive yourself, because that's another big issue, right, of why people resist resilience, probably, is they go, I deserve this. So if it's the opposite of what I just talked about, if there's a person that is more prone toward insecurity and not confidence, they'll probably immediately go to a place of, this was my fault. My husband, I'll use another example. Sorry, babe, if you ever watch this, but he was let go from his job recently to no fault of his own. The CEO of his company was singing his praises, like, we wish we didn't have to make these changes in this region, but unfortunately we have to. And so they let him go, but immediately he went into a space of, I could have done this, I should have done that. And that's
Right.
part of grief, like the bargaining stage. But
Right.
but he's more prone toward his insecurity to say, it's probably because I didn't complete this, and this, or I didn't do better here. And he was one of their like top people in like all
Right.
of Southern California. So it literally was not him. But his insecurity said, and then that voice got louder and louder.
Right.
So he rabbit trailed it. But if you have self-care to take care and know the balance in you, then when those moments hit, you can go, okay, I might have needed to own this, but then this is the reality of what just happened.
Right.
And it doesn't have to tip the scale,
on
No.
either end.
Exactly.
On either end, because
Yeah.
then because having like it's the same thing with like having grace for yourself or being like kind to yourself can turn into like, oh, it's like I'm just the best in everything. It's
yeah,
like, well,
that can turn into arrogance real quick.
Yeah, you're kind.
That doesn't look
you
good on
kind of
anyone.
were a tool, so. But
let's not move
You
past
kind
that.
of were a
yeah,
punk.
yeah. It's like, yes, it's okay that you were a tool, but you were a tool.
But
you
you
know?
were. But isn't
Yeah.
that interesting though? About just to touch on that,
Right.
How beautiful that is, though, that if we could just live authentically, like what you
Right.
just said, is to allow grace and space for people to say, yeah, but you were kind of a tool, to use that
Right.
word. It's like you were a jerk to them or you
Right.
did this. And then to say, but I love you. Because
Right.
the reason people don't want to admit, well, I was a tool, so I probably did, quote unquote, deserve that thing, that reactionary thing to happen, because they feel shame. And they feel guilt, and they feel like then no one will really love me, accept me, choose me, do life with me. But if we could create spaces, talk about resiliency in like a community. If we could create spaces for people to be real, and to say, yeah, you know what, I was a tool. That was my bad. And then people to respond with grace, right? And love versus like, that's right, and judgment, whatever.
And you'll always be a tool.
Exactly. You're a tool and you'll always be a tool.
Might as well get your toolbox over there and you can live
Put
here.
yourself in there.
But to say, hey, I see you and you're a tool, but guess what? I love
you are more than a tool.
You are more than a tool.
And we're going to sharpen this tool
That's
and
what
make
we'll
it
call
better.
this episode. More than a tool.
More than a tool.
Yeah.
It's good.
I also, I think the mindfulness of and Daryl has talked about this, of getting through, some trials that we go through is being present and being mindful of what you're actually experiencing. We've talked about the monks, or was it the monks who they did a test on like a pain study with them?
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah, I was talking about mindfulness and being present. And in the study, I think I mentioned this on the other episode, but it's just a quick reference for you. So they did this test on pain. They wanted to see if mindfulness can help somebody withstand pain, right? So what they did was they got this really hot piece of metal. I think they had people hold on to it. And so they had people who practiced mindfulness do it and people who did not practice mindfulness do it, right? And so people would hold on to it and they didn't, like people who weren't practicing mindfulness, they hold on and it would start hurting and hurt. So let go, and then they would back away. What they found was the people who practiced mindfulness and these monks, that they would hold on to the pain. These aren't like Shaolin monks, so they're not like super physically, they're not like super like they haven't numbed
the
all
Avenger
their
monks.
nerves. Yeah, no, so not like superhuman or anything, but they were just monks who practiced mindfulness, right? So they would hold on to it, and they would hold on to it longer. And what they found was that the monks were more present with the pain, so they knew how much they were actually experiencing. Where the people who let go in anticipation of it getting worse.
Oh, wow.
So they didn't experience as much pain because they were anticipating it getting worse, and the anticipation caused them to let go.
There was too much fear in that.
There was too much fear in the anticipation of the pain getting worse, so they didn't hold on as long.
Whereas the other was diminishing it because they realized it's as worse as it's going to get right now. And then if I no longer hold this, it'll get less. Is that what?
No, because eventually they would let go.
Oh, okay.
But all the people who practiced mindfulness and were present with the pain, they were able to withstand more.
Right.
Because they were just with it rather than thinking about how painful it's going to get and then wanting to give up sooner.
Right.
Yeah.
Daryl and I tried this with
with the car.
With a car, and Daryl is more resilient and more mindful than I am. The car was sitting in the hot sun, and so we would put our hands on the thing, and I was like, it took it off, and Daryl he's just sitting there like this. He was feeling it until the point where it actually his hand started to cool down the car, and so he was fine. He could just hold it there.
Wow.
Yeah.
The power of
he holds up his hand, it's just black. It's like all scar tissue.
That's also called stupidity, guys.
Yeah.
Great.
But I went on I've been enjoying these. I've only done 2 of them, so I can't say that I've been doing it. But these like midnight runs, I've been going at night, like late at night, like 11 p.m. I just went on a midnight one last night, and just been practicing like being really mindful or being really present with my body while I'm running. Mm-hmm. And this is something that I used to do when I ran more often too, which is I would never think of like when I'm going to get finished, or at least try to not think of the finish line. I would just run right where where I was, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like even like look at the things around me, just not be thinking about the finish line, right? But I've been going on these runs and I've been practicing the same thing, just literally feeling all of my body as my leg kind of hits the ground, and it like, you know, shakes my muscles or, you know, whatever, and it totally changes the run. It changes the run, because I'm not like focused on how exhausted I am, or I'm not focused on, you know, I only have this much left to go. If I could just get the, you know, I'm just running. You know what I mean? And then there was a point where I was like running and I forgot that I was running. You know, like
because you were so present.
Because I was so present that I actually forgot that I was running, and then it was like I was running, and then I just woke up. You know, and I was like, oh, I'm running. This is hard. You know,
and then you're in the middle of the street, and there's cars.
I'm like, no.
That's when you go from mindfulness into transcendence.
Right. But that's so true. That's so true.
But there is an aspect to that where it's like you do become so present with what you're doing. It's flow state, where it's like I'm sure that if I continued to practice that, I could have an entire run where I was just in flow, and then finish the run and be like, you know, like that would be kind of crazy. I'm sure there's people that do it. But I would.
The human body and
that's
mind.
the 7 to me. I just don't want to experience any pain. I want to get to a point.
Sure. But the human body and mind are so ridiculously beyond what we can even imagine. Like I just, similar to your story, I just heard a story about, and this is, you know, don't call us PETA, we love little rats, but they did an experiment a long time ago with, you know, where they put a little mouse or whatever rat in a thing of water. Have you guys heard this story? And they timed it and to see how long they would tread water, and they treaded water for 15 minutes and died, like all of them. It was like a really consistent 15 minutes. And then they did an experiment where they were treading water, and then they would, right before the 15-minute mark, because that seemed to be the threshold of how long they'd last, they would take them out. Okay, so it's like 14 minutes and 50 seconds. They take them out, and then they dry them off, and you know, whatever, and then they put them back in the water. How long do you think that they swam for after that? This is a
2 hours.
Question. 2 hours. Okay, how long do you think, Daryl?
15 minutes.
15 minutes. Okay, they swam for 60 hours.
60 hours?
So from 15 minutes to 60 hours, only because of the hope of their mindset that
they could be saved.
They could be saved.
Oh my God.
Wow. 60 hours.
Google it if you don't believe me. Isn't that insane? And so from 15 minutes to 60 hours, and that's like a little rat. I mean, and the human brain and the way we are wired.
Oh my God.
Isn't that mind blowing?
60 hours?
60 hours.
Why did you wait till this point? That's so crazy.
I'm sorry.
We've been talking about resilience for an hour.
It just came to
What
me.
if we wrapped up? What if we wrapped up and missed that?
I was about to shut off this podcast, and that would not be in there.
When you were sharing your story, I was like, this is exactly like the mouse story I just heard. I'm at this conference thing I was watching online, because they shared about this. They shared about mindset. And that literally by definition is resilience, because that little guy had the hope that he might be saved, right?
Why didn't you mention this before I talked about talking through my eye to the mic? That was the first thing we talked about, and people turned it off immediately.
I'm sorry. If you made it this far, you've heard the gold.
Wow.
You had to wait for the gold.
It is the hope. The hope of
there's salvation coming, there's goodness coming, there's life ahead.
So it's all of these things balanced then, right? Because you kind of have the aspect of the preemptive, hey, I need to learn what I'm tied to so that maybe it wouldn't have as much of an effect on it. But if it does have effect on me, I'm going to be okay with it.
Right.
And be okay with my emotions, have the self-care, right? Do all that stuff, get solid relationships around me, and then be present in the midst of it. But also to have the hope for the future, where it's like the Bible says, like the present sufferings, they can't compare with the eternal weight of glory that's coming. Like there is a hope, like in the future, and we're gonna make it through, guys. Like it's gonna be all right. Well,
it's even Jesus's words, like, in this world you will have trouble, not if or when. It's you will, but take heart, because I've overcome the world. And that's the whole point of when we're waiting for that salvation moment to come, like the hope, there's freedom, there's life, I'm not treading water anymore. When we see that happen in our life, it allows us the resilience to know, okay, the next time I'm treading water, I know that there's trouble, but I can take heart, because there is somebody there to come in and help us out of the water eventually. And a lot of that's just the way the Lord's wired us to, like, all these things we just talked about, you know, have these things prepared, have these things, an awareness of yourself, your mindset, who you are, like your identity, all that stuff, all working together, solid relationships around you to do life with. It all helps you to be more resilient when pain inevitably does and will come.
Right.
Yeah. Romans 5. Whenever I was when I was a teenager and going through a lot of different painful things, I found a
Puberty.
lot of puberty. Trying to find a girlfriend.
Working at Taco Bell. Hey,
Oh my goodness.
hey, Taco Bell's bomb. If you work there.
So whenever I was going through a lot of hardship and kind of like where the turn of my faith, when I really was very intentional about spending time with God and the Word, and navigating a lot of like sadness and sorrow and grief. And I remember coming to a few different passages that talked about resilience and all those passages, like in James, like, count it all joy when you face your trials. But one of them was Romans 5, and Romans 5:3 says, we can rejoice too when we run into problems and trials, for we know that they help us develop endurance. Right, the problems and trials help us develop
resilience,
endurance, and endurance develops strength of character, and character strengthens our confident hope of salvation.
That's right.
And this hope will not lead to disappointment.
Wow.
For we know how dearly God loves us because He has given us the Holy Spirit to fill our hearts with His love. And he goes on to say, when we're utterly helpless,
it will not lead to disappointment.
Wow.
Christ came. Yeah, it will not lead to disappointment.
Wow.
But this hope, the hope that we have really is huge in the ability to keep going. And
Absolutely.
That's
it's detrimental to it.
It reminded me of Brene Brown's example of people being in like prison camps, and those who were expecting to be released really quickly didn't last very long. But those who had like a long-term mindset,
Wow.
they actually held on to hope kind of in a different way, where they decided to live where they were, make the best out of the situation, but still believe that it's going to be better.
Wow.
Without trying to,
Short it.
Yeah, exactly. They weren't trying to short it or bypass it or cut it. They're like, well, this is the situation. Let's make the most of it.
Yeah.
Still believing that it'll be better.
Wow. Making the best of whatever circumstance you're in.
Yeah.
But believing and hoping for a balanced, brighter, more freer future.
Right. We don't need to try to escape the present to have hope for the future.
That'll preach.
Whoa.
You should write that down, Preacher Aaron. That was
Just take it straight from Daryl. I'm not quoting you either.
I'm not quoting. That's rude.
Take it. Yeah.
Wow.
But
that's really good.
It's huge. We can be present in the pain and still hope for the future.
Right.
Yeah. Amen. And that is
resilience.
Resilience. Nailed it.
But yeah, it's kind of like we'll end it soon, but we'll end it soon. Said that weird. I was talking to Daryl about it this morning, but how even I'm young. I'm only 26, but I feel like I've been through a good amount of stuff. Most of it's mental stuff. I gone crazy, just straight up crazy. Wow. Oh my gosh. If I had time to talk about how crazy I got, but nothing's killed me. He knows what I'm going to say, and he thinks it's funny every time I say it. But I was telling him this morning, I was like, you know what? Sometimes I think about just the fact that I'm never going to die. And he's like, what do you mean?
Oh my goodness.
But I mean, not just physically, but that is the hope, and that is the hope. I mean, of Jesus, is that even if I die physically, I'm never going to die. So whatever I go through now, it does, even having that mindset, become kind of inconsequential almost to the, like, or not inconsequential, maybe that's the wrong word, but where it says like it can't compare to the fact that it's just like, you can't kill me. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to die. I'm going to be all right. Like, the anxiety hasn't killed me yet. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, the sadness hasn't killed me yet. You know what I mean? And I've been at the point where it's like, man, life ain't worth living,
Yeah.
Like, I've definitely been to those points, but coming back and then again, having those people around me to encourage me, or having purpose and feeling and walking in that, it's like, man, like, this is just not going to take me out.
Yeah.
And that kind of resolve for that hope in the future too, and then even past death, that's unreal. You know what I mean? It's like, and even if it does kill me physically, I still am not going to die.
Right.
It's that's a crazy thought in general. Like, we don't really, like, usually we talk about like eternal life in church, but it's just like, just saying it that way, it's like, you're never going to die. It's like, what? just sounds crazy to me.
Does
Like,
sound
what a
crazy.
crazy gift. It's just very,
Yeah.
you know. But that gives me so much hope for what I'm going through today. You know,
Yeah.
is that I'm gonna make it through, and then even the fact of what we talked about before, it's like I'm only gonna get better, and I'm only
Right.
gonna get stronger, and there's only more in the future, and that perspective changes everything.
Changes everything,
You know what I mean?
right.
Because then you can count it all joy when you meet various kinds of trials. You know what I mean? Because you're getting endurance, and you're getting character, and you're building hope, and it's like,
Right.
oh, it's just an upward battle. You know?
That's when you actually become crazy. Something horrible happens. You're like, this is
Oh,
awesome.
yes.
And
What's
that-
going to come from it?
and that's
Yeah.
that's sometimes
That's quite literally what happened when you guys, I think, were around right in those first couple of days when Joshua lost his job just recently.
Right.
Because I had already been on my journey. I'm like, half a year into it.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, just coming out of like, we're excited. And this is, okay, let's see what's ahead. And then when Joshua loses his job too, and we're like, wait a minute, we have no job, and we have children, and we have a mortgage, and then we just laughed. And it was a genuine, like, maybe it's because we're like, what else can you do but laugh? But no, we genuinely felt like, this is going to be good. This
Right.
means something beyond what we could have even imagined
Right.
is about to happen, and to posture ourselves to like see what's on the horizon. It's actually been really fun.
Right.
And it seems crazy because everyone that we know is like, well, are you going to get a job? Is Josh who's going to get a job first? What are you going to, and we're like, we're just chilling right now and spending time with our kids and enjoying a summer of rest that we've never had in our whole life as a married couple yet. Actually, at the same time, had this much time off together. So we're doing
Right.
fun things. We're going to travel, and and it's crazy. It literally doesn't make sense, like logical sense.
Right.
But when you have gone through it so many times, it does build a resilience to see, okay,
Right.
this isn't going to kill us. This is going to make us stronger, better, more awesome, like more of a story to tell, like more of a testimony, more of purpose. And it's pretty exciting. But to
Right.
the natural world, it's like, aren't you going to live in fear? Aren't you scared? Don't you need to pay your bills? And yes, all that's true. But wow, like we're just so hopeful for what's
Right.
to come. So yeah, it's pretty exciting.
It's awesome.
And a little crazy. But we haven't said I'm never going to die. So I'll go home and tell
crazy?
Josh that,
We're never
you know
gonna
what,
die.
babe? We're never going to die. He's going to be like, what?
Well, yeah, yeah. It's
I hear what you're saying, though.
It's I've experienced anxiety to the point of just like being like crippled. You know what I mean? Where it's like I can't even get out of bed, and then it's like I wake up the next day and it gets a little bit better, and then I move on, and then I have day. You know what I mean? So it feels like to have that amount of heaviness to that point. Where it's just literally like. I was telling Gerald, I haven't been to the Job point where it's like I despise the day I was born. But I'm alive.
Yeah.
I woke up today and I'm still here. So
Yeah.
So obviously, at least for me, and this is again the majority of my problems is all up here. This guy right here, they can't kill me.
Right.
You know?
yeah.
So it kind of changes my mindset about how I experience life and how it
Sure.
affects me mentally or how it affects, my mind or whatever, because it's just like at the end of the day, it's like I can't die. I can't die.
I can't die.
And I'm going to whisper that
I can't die.
in the ears of my enemies as they stab me. They stab me and I'll reach over and I'll whisper in their ear and I'll go, I can't die.
It's like, come,
They're probably
come
really
at me,
freaked
bro.
out.
Exactly.
If you stab somebody and you whisper to them, I can't.
Oh my goodness.
They'd be terrified.
And now we need to wrap it up because this is getting creepy,
Oh,
friends.
man.
Okay, that's so awesome.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, we hope that you've grown with us in this journey, and if you made it this far, make
You're
sure to follow
resilient.
us on. Yeah, you are very
If
resilient.
you made it to the end of this one, you're very resilient.
Yeah.
You have grown in your
Hour and
resilience.
10 minutes. Come on now, baby. Come on now, somebody. We got too much to say. We have 3 weeks off, and we just had to go off today.
Oh my God.
And the dolphins are here.
Anyway, make sure to follow us on Spotify. Make sure to follow us on Instagram. Instagram, Your Brain on God, iTunes podcast, TikTok, all of the goodies.
All the
you know what I'm
goodies.
saying? I'll be at camp next week, so we taking a week off, but we'll
And the
see
week
you.
after that, aren't you?
Well, I'll be back on Thursday. We'll talk about it later, Daryl.
right.
All right, but maybe 2
Sounds
weeks.
good.
Hey, but stay with us. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And we'll see you guys real soon.
Hey, thanks for having
we
me.
love you. Yes, and thank you, Heather.
Heather, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah.
So
Any,
you.
fun.
It's
any
so-
sign off you want to do?
I mean, love you guys. Love your podcast. This has been encouraging. Hopefully I'll be on again someday soon, but it's been a blessing.
Awesome.
Blessing.
Yay.
Love
A blessing. She's so Christian.
Super Christian.
Oh my God.
Hey, I did not swear one time this whole hour, and that is impressive.
Hey,
Well done.
Thank you for doing that. I appreciate that. Just wouldn't know. Anyway, my editing skills aren't that good. All right. Well, we love you guys.
We
Have an
love
amazing
you.
week. We'll see you next week on episode 23 of Your Brain on God.
God.
Later.